I'm going to hand over to our panel and ask each one of them to make an opening statement about what they think about the role of professionals in the age of social media, starting with Gordon Dennis, please.
Right. Is the mic live? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, again. My answers to David's implicit question is that we face an absolute avalanche of data. It's tumbling down on us from all sides. And my personal belief, especially in technical communication, but not just technical communication, is that this actually means that technical communication professionals are needed more, not less. That's the first point. The second point is that I also fervently believe that what we see as social media today is not like it was 5 years ago, and it's not going to be like it in 5 years' time. It's going to change enormously. The way we're going to use it is going to change enormously. We will all learn. Plus, of course, there's a younger generation coming up behind us who will be smart enough to exploit it in ways we can't imagine right now. So I think there's an increased need for us all. We must all, as I said yesterday, be more imaginative. There are ways we can use social media which do not include mucking about on Facebook, if I may give my credentials away, which nevertheless will be very valuable to us. So I see a greater need for technical communication professionals, not a lesser one.
Thank you very much. Karen.
Yes. There was coincidentally a case recently that was published in a journal in Denmark. I'll provide the link later on. And it was about the big shipping company Maersk Line. And if you know anything about shipping, this is, I mean, it's as big as P&O Lloyd because they bought them and this, that, and the other thing. They're really, really big. And this is a big enterprise. They make hardware, they make ships, and yes, they have technical communicators, and yet they have actually shown brilliance in using social media, I'd say social business, having learned a lot from Rahel while I'm here. And they are on Twitter, and they are on Facebook, and they are doing other things. And you think, how can you engage people in shipbuilding? But they're building an awareness of what they're doing in the world, maybe conservation efforts because they're out in the seas, getting all the Danes to come and see their giant, huge, humongous, giant ship. It was the largest in the world until China now has just launched their biggest ship. But they're engaging the public, and they're engaging internally. They have internal social media. And the key thing was driven all by one communications manager. It was about people are driving all this, not technology. It doesn't matter if you use paper and pen or Facebook or whatever, it's all about people. And that was the key thing, and also getting the buy-in from all the different levels. And we're people, so yeah, like Gordon says, we ought to be there. We ought to be involved in driving these things as the people we are.
Thank you very much. Rahel, what would you like to add?
Well, Karen alluded to it, that I think it's a bigger question than social media. It really is about social business. It's about collaboration, breaking down silos, and that's the silos between departments, but it's also the silos between us, the brand, and our customers. And so we need to think about people as social animals. We're pack animals. We crave interaction. And so if we're not creating content right from the get-go that's meant for social in some way, we're not doing our jobs right. We have to think about social on all these different levels of saying, we're putting this out there, but is it right? Do you have other feedback? Do you want to enhance it? Do you want to, is there something that you want to contribute? Because if you are, we are listening. You are part of a conversation, but we are part of the conversation. And we can't just look at this as we throw information and do with it what you will, and we don't care what you say, and we're not listening, and we're just this kind of money-making machine that will take your money, but we don't really care what you think.
Thank you. Someone was listening to Roger earlier today. Doug, what
want to give me money? I'll take it.
Right.
So there are two really kind of things I was thinking about in preparation for this. One is that many of our businesses are radically changing. We heard yesterday, for example, about how Siemens is not delivering trains, they're delivering a service contract, that where the SLA is they're agreeing to move a certain amount of people in X amount of time. And if it takes 100 trains or 115 trains, great. British Railways doesn't care. They're purchasing a contract to deliver X amount of people. So I thought that was a really interesting anecdote, because I never thought about our business at Microsoft is definitely moving into the services world and moving towards subscription-based content. But I never thought about it in terms of large-scale manufacturing as well, and that's definitely a trend that we see across large businesses and small businesses everywhere. So the point there, I think, is that if you're in a continual service, then you have to think about your content delivery in a continuous manner. You can't just be sitting on a document set, releasing it once every 4 years, and then moving on to the next thing. So social media allows you to have that interaction and rapid feedback that you need to be able to survive in a service economy. So I think that's a really key point, because if you saw my speech yesterday, I drew this curve for how to manage change. And I think our customers need to be on that change management ladder too. A lot of them are sort of freaked out by the idea of moving to a service economy or a service-based product. Some of them are already there. Some of them, that's what they want. But a lot of them need to be pulled along into that way. And so the way you can communicate with them is through social networking. And I think the second point, too, is, though, Surface, just like any other content media, social networking requires a strategy. You have to have an outcome in mind. A friend of mine actually called me up the other day. He runs a bank, and he has a Facebook page where nothing ever happens. And I asked him, why do you have this Facebook page? And he said, well, don't we have to have a Facebook page? I'm like, no, you don't. If you don't know what to do with your Facebook page, then you don't need a Facebook page. Your customers are coming to you for loans, not necessarily to feel good about your bank. So have a direct and targeted strategy for every social media that you participate in, and then don't walk away from it. Because that's the thing about social media. If you just spend your time in a very short investment, like as if it were a marketing campaign, it's not going to work. Because the currency of social media is trust, and it's dedication, and it's commitment. And if you jump into something and walk away from it, it's not going to work. So it requires you to think about it as a dedicated thing. A lot of people think we can do this sort of on the side or in 5-minute chunks every day. But it's like any other content media. It requires that dedication and that strategy and targeting.
Thanks very much. Before we move on to the questions I've received, I have a question my own which I'd like to ask the panel. What extent can change and progress be made by individual contributors, and how much depends on the organization changing first and management changing first? For example, if you're in an organization that seems to be a little backward in coming forward to social media, can you as an individual do something about that? Yes?
I would point to the case study of the Comcast guy. How many of you know the Comcast guy story? So there's it's like Sky TV here, or Sky, or British Telecom. They offer broadband and all these different services. And Comcast in the United States, terrible reputation, terrible. So one guy I think in customer support, he decided that he would have a Twitter account and he would start monitoring it, and he would answer all the questions. So people would rant about something, and he would say, actually, the answer to that question is over here. Here's a link. Or, call me, or, DM me, and I will answer your question for you. And I think by himself, he managed to turn around the reputation of Comcast, because he was the only one doing it for the longest time. And he was funny about it, and he was good-humored about it, and he was doing it as a skunkworks project, completely off the radar. So in some cases, you could turn around a company. In a lot of organizations, though, you have to have approval from, and if I think back to like City of Vancouver, you know, you couldn't. Everything was so politically, it had to be politically thought out before you said something, because people will jump on the craziest things, and the communications department knows who the crazies are, and who, you know, who comes in and will focus on some minutiae and make a big deal out of it. So in other organizations, you have to have it driven by, you know, the powers that be. So I think it's really, it goes back to what Doug said, you know, you have to have the strategy. And so in some places you can kind of jump on it, and in other places you don't dare.
I think, I quite agree. It is there are political things come into it, inevitably. We've got a group of people here, we've got politics. You've also got culture, which transcends that, and some industries are far more resistant to change than others. The aviation industry, which by now you all know I come from, at one and the same time uses very high-tech equipment and is very change resistant in many quarters. They're doing a lot of evaluation at the moment to see if this electricity stuff will catch on. And they are very resistant to change, despite being high-tech, based on high-tech products. And that makes a big difference as well. That overlays it and tends to drive some of the politics.
I'm just laughing because I don't tweet that often. But the last time I tweeted was a couple months ago before I came here, and my tweet was, Comcast, worst service ever. They were billing my father twice, for for some reason. Anyway, it's funny.
I was just going to say that, yeah, sometimes sticking your nose out can be dangerous, because I was in a company where a new salesperson came in and wanted to try out a new social media platform for knowledge sharing, and we tried to run a little pilot, him, myself, and 2 people in the US who were always out of the loop of the people in the Denmark office. And the upshot was that I got a written warning from my boss and was told that, I had 24 hours to consider whether I wanted to continue in that job or what. And I came back the next day and I said, I'm really, really sorry, and I'm going to be a good girl now. And of course, my mind was already going ahead to, I got to get out of here. And which I did, fortunately. And I'm in the place I'm in now, and I'm very happy and all serendipitous getting a job offer like that. So that's the extreme. And I meant well. It was a terrible misunderstanding. It was a language thing. I had written a mail where there was a laughing smiley, big D, and talking to somebody, and he misunderstood it. And he had a history. He had somebody that had backstabbed him once. He thought this was a new backstabbing effort and all that. So that's the danger thing. But on the other hand, I think there's a lot of benefit. And there's actually somebody who's written a book about it called Undercover UX, or Undercover User Experience, spelled out, by a guy named Kenneth Bowles. It's a Welsh spelling, begins with a C, but Undercover User Experience, and it's very good. And it's about being, for example, anybody who's a lone author and is interested in those kinds of things, he gives a recipe for how do you tackle it, how do you slowly broach it. And I think sometimes the example is just, being a good advocate in your position, the diplomat, the smiling, the helpful, all that kind of stuff, like this Comcast tweeter. Slowly, like ripples in water, it can spread, and hopefully if management is amenable to all this, it'll work out nicely. So there's a couple of extremes there.
Thanks very much. I'm going to move on to the first of the submitted questions, submitted by an anonymous conference attendee, and it's quite a technical question. It says, how are trends in online search, such as the Panda and Penguin updates from Google, which decide what links are valid and what links are not, how is that going to affect the process for content creation and review? Does anyone have a view on that?
Well, I can talk about it a little bit. I'm not an SEO expert by any means, but I do my bit in there. So I don't know if from a social point of view, it's really going to change things, but about content creation and review. So about content creation, it means that we are moving towards more kind of content written for humans as opposed to content written for SEO. So, loading something up with keywords is actually going to reduce your rank further. And if you have the same content published on multiple sites, that's going to give you a negative hit on Google. So where it becomes interesting, because if you say, okay, I'm a blogger, so I'm not going to take my blog post and offer it to 500 people to publish on their site. And there's actually a very good article about, and I put it on my Delicious account, so if you want to read it, you can go there and find it, about how someone put a link to their blog post because they thought it was so good, and they have all these sub companies, so they have divisions, and so each one of them published it as well, and all of a sudden their traffic plummeted because Google picked up on this and thought it was spamming. So you're going to have those kinds of situations, but where it gets interesting is when you have product content. So you're a manufacturer and you create product content that describes your product, and you offer it to the 25 companies that distribute that content. And the distributors actually want the vendors to write the content because it saves them from having to write it all. But now you've got 25 sites that have the same content, and now Google's going to ding you negatively for it. So how you create content could mean that the vendor has to create 25 instances of the content that are substantially different so that Google won't see that you've only changed one word. But then if you do that, who gets the primary, who gets the best one of those versions? So, all those kinds of questions are starting to crop up. When it comes to reviews, it probably won't have any impact because user-generated content is pretty unique. Nobody says the same thing twice in exactly the same way. It comes from different people. It's in a reviews section, so it's probably tagged as user-generated content, and so I don't think it will change that as much.
Yeah, a few points on that. So the search engines are constantly tuning their algorithms to look for quality content. And really, some of the fundamentals of quality content have not changed, but people are doing a lot of tricks to try and get around that. So the cleaner that you can keep your content, both in terms of the actual text that you're writing and also in terms of the schema, like your code schema, is really important. Because, like for example, there was a friend of mine who works at a Midwestern newspaper in the United States, asked me to take a look at their new CMS implementation. And each one of their articles had, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It had like 7,000 to 8,000 lines of code. They were making, 30, 40 JavaScript calls for every article. The actual body text was being called in from somewhere else by a script call. So there was no body text on the page source. So when you do things like that, you overcomplicate your system, then Google, you risk the search engines considering your content as junk because it can't find any relevant content in the body text. So in that particular case, their search engine referrals dropped by more than 50% year over year, when the newspaper industry overall, their web traffic should have been increasing by something like on the order of 15 to 20%. So I guess the moral of the story there is just, keep things very straightforward and simple and easy for the search engines to discover.
I have just a couple of observations about that. I think one of the things that's come up in the conference has been there's going to be a lot of change in terms of who the players in the marketplace are. Some well-known names are going to take a dive. Now, you can argue on the one hand that has always happened. We especially know about that in our country. On the other hand, I think you can also argue that we're in uncharted territory here and that some of the results of this are going to be quite unexpected, and you're going to see some quite big things slide down the tubes. And I think that's inevitable, but trying to predict who they're going to be is very, very difficult. It's the law of unintended consequences, if you will. So we're in for a strange ride, I think, with some of this.
Yes, this is to kind of build on what Doug said and a little bit on what Gordon said. So when you think about the kind of the overcomplication, so my client is a distributor, and what people search for are data sheets. because they want to know about the product and they want to know the technical specs of a product. And someone way back when had decided that none of the links should be readable by Google for data sheets. And so now how do you undo that, right? So now, and they built this kind of very complicated system around it. So we have to look at the technical side of content. So when somebody says, I do content strategy, and they're just worrying about wordsmithing, that's not good enough. You have to think about the delivery systems. And so one of the things that Google has done, well, all the search engines came together a couple years ago and said, okay, there are formats for things, there are international standards, and we're going to, for micro formats, so we're going to use schema.org, that's our chosen organization, we're going to use their standards for content. So if you have a product, it should be in the product micro format. If you have a contact, it should be in the contact micro format. An event, it should be in the event micro format. You should use all the proper micro formats. So, you know, you have to go to the developers or to whoever it is and make sure that they've got the right XML wrapper around the content. So now we have things like, you know, Google authorship, and then I just read the other day that they just killed authorship because, you know, so it's not enough to say we're doing it once, walk away. We have to keep on top of it.
Okay. I'm going to move, oh, sorry.
Just really, really quick, it just, this emphasizes the point that has been raised throughout the conference, and that's about we have to keep educating ourselves because change is coming, and I mean, it hasn't stopped, it's always been here. And if we sit still for one moment, we're going to be the ones that fall off the radar kind of thing. And educating yourself, keeping abreast of things, we have to do that. And if you haven't realized that now, then realize it now.
I'm now going to move on to the second question, which was submitted non-anonymously by John Carney. And his question is about who are we? And that is to say, his question like this. Technical author, technical writer, content designer, information developer. Why so many titles for the same damn job? And do you agree that they're the same damn job?
Why look at me?
I'm staying away from that one. Yeah, I've had about 6 different titles at Microsoft, so I don't think I have anything great to add to that.
Okay, yeah, well, I was thinking, I mean, we see that also in the user experience or the usability field where there's loads of titles, and I think sometimes the problem is we're using language, internally we can say technical communicator and argue about the difference between that and a technical writer, and yet management or a job opening will just say we need somebody that does X or whatever, so they might not have it. So often we're quibbling about things that are really petty in others' opinion. So sometimes we might have to find out, well, what language are they talking? If we want to get hired, if we want them to notice us, what do we have to do? And that's probably why these new titles have proliferated, because it suddenly has to grab their attention, kind of like SEO stuff. You know, we have to put up the right, you know, what's the meta tag above my head so that somebody notices me as opposed to me just disappearing in the mud. And it's really tricky. So I guess the classic best answer is just, it depends.
I don't think it is one job. I think it's one function, but it involves different disciplines. One of the changes I've noticed since the last time I presented for you guys in Oxford, I think 5 years ago, is that at that conference, most of what was being said was authoring, no question about it. This conference is markedly different because I'm hearing a lot more things which are familiar to me as a reformed software developer. I used to earn my living as a software developer. As you can see, my head's a funny shape. And I've heard a lot more at this conference. People have been talking about SVG. People have been talking about XSLT. I heard none of that at the last conference I was at. I'm hearing in spades here. Now, my contention is that it's difficult to have the sort of left brain, right brain combination to get your head around all of that. Some people cannot be coders. They do not have the aptitude for it. Not because they're stupid, not because they're obstreperous, it's because they don't have the aptitude for it. There are good authors and bad authors, and I think one thing that you have to bear in mind, particularly with social media, is just because you can write does not mean you can write well. There's a distinction there. And I think it's going to become more of a team effort because you will not be able to get away without doing some of the technical stuff as well. And not everybody can keep all that in their head. Very clever people can. I'm not one of them. I can do some of both, but you know, I'm not pretending that I can do all of it really well. And I think it is going to be more of a team effort.
Yes, I say it's cultural currency. So information design has been kind of co-opted by the museum group. So they have information designers. And so when I hear information designer, I'm automatically thinking, oh, you do something for museums. But in North America, I would drive a sedan or a station wagon that has a hood and a trunk. Here, I drive either a saloon car or an estate car with a bonnet and a boot. And so...
Where's Jerry?
I haven't heard that one yet. But, you know, it causes no end of confusion. But, if I were to mix up those terms, it would cause confusion amongst my audience. So I have to know what my audience expects. What is the currency? And so I depend on what their culture is. It's part of audience analysis. If their culture is that, in one agency used to hire me all the time, and they called me a management consultant. Why did they call me a management consultant? Because the NAFTA rules, the North American Free Trade Agreement rules, said that you either had to be a writer of technical documents, or you had to be like something on the list. And they said, well, you're not a tech writer. You're kind of like, you're a content strategist. So you're closer to a management consultant. So that was my title, management consultant, because my audience was the border guards at the American border, right? And so that, I had to be one or the other. And that was, and I still, when people ask me what do I do, and I say content strategy, and they go, what's content? And I go, okay, it's like a management consultant, but instead of failed financial turnarounds, I get, failed web content turnarounds, and they kind of get it. So I think, all these terms, you don't have to have them, you don't have to use them, but sometimes you will want to use them if you do your audience analysis right, and you want to have that kind of clarity for your audience.
I'm glad to know I'm now a management consultant for content. That sounds really cool. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah. Ali.
I just Googled how to use Microsoft Office 2013. And I got 10 responses, out of which 2 are from Microsoft, 3 from YouTube, and 1 on TechRadar. So how do we ensure that, whatever we have on our site is the most up-to-date information? Because anybody who uses our product has the liberty to go ahead and create content on his or her own.
Well, there's sort of, I'll take that one. Unless you guys have a better answer than me, go for it.
You go for it.
Well, that's an interesting question, but we really try to tune things so that when you're in the product itself, you get the best results. And if somebody out there has got a better answer, great. So in certain Office products, you will actually find sources from other people that were not generated by us in the search results within the product itself. So what we want is for the customers to get the best answers possible, and we'll look at our own results and we'll look at community results too, because there are far more queries than what it is we can answer. But we do have an advantage over the community, which is that we understand more about what the customers are searching for. So when we really understand those top intents, we'll really tune to try and make sure that they get the best answer possible, because we can do that better than the community can.
I have a little take on that. I'd say that we have to embrace that. It's kind of embracing change, because there's an artifact in archaeology from Denmark, and there's this sun worshipping thing that it's pure gold. It was found in a bog, and it's like the #1 thing in the National Museum of Copenhagen. And the best picture on the internet is not on the National Museum site. And when they found out that they were not getting hits on their website, that everyone was going to the Wikipedia article, they had the dilemma. Could they do something like many people do, like musicians or whatever, take down and all that kind of stuff? But no, the Danish National Archives then decided to collaborate with Wikipedia, and they actually hired a Wikipedian in residence, and they do regular collaboration. We go on photo shoots. We get to go into all these dusty archives and have a lot of great fun, because I'm involved in Wikipedia Denmark. But the thing is, they thought, let's not fight it. Let's play with it. Let's help it, and let's encourage people. They can post pictures. All the tourists can post pictures on Wikimedia Commons, and then maybe the museums can pick up those, and then because they're Creative Commons licensed, they can have them there. So there's a mutual, a bonding, a sharing, and working with it and not fighting it. It makes it a lot more fun.
Do you have something to add?
Well, I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this, and this comes from my consulting at eBay last year, where many years ago, customers or people who used eBay as sellers created some guides to kind of compensate for the lack of help. And that's fine, except that what happens when you have volunteers who do things, they publish and forget. And then you run into that situation where people follow some instructions that are out of date, and next thing you know, they want to sue the company. And even if the company can prove that it's a frivolous lawsuit, it could cost $10 million to go through all the machinations and all the lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So at some point, you have to have a strategy on what you're going to allow. Well, I shouldn't say allow, because you can't stop people from doing stuff. They'll find a way. But how do you manage the things that are important to be managed? So to say there shouldn't be a need for someone to go out and do it because we realize this is important for us, instead of saying, hey, we're going to save a little bit of money by having them do it. To say, this could backfire later, so we're going to do this in-house, and we will. Maybe if people want to volunteer to do something, we will give them the form to publish it on so that we can take it down when it's out of date. So you have to think about all those bits and pieces, and it's like compliance and legal and updates and so on, to figure out what you need to be involved with now, what you need to be involved with later, how you co-opt or involve or collaborate with other people in a way that makes business sense, long-term business sense.
I think it depends what it is you're trying to get information about. Two of my personal war stories. I run a software development shop. We're a visualstudio.net user. Therefore, we're dependent on Microsoft for quite a lot. And perhaps unfashionably, I'll say I'm absolutely with what Doug says in that context. We rely on the extensive help that's available from Microsoft. I am not going to sit here and bash Bill Gates, because I think we're getting, if we didn't like it, we would change from visualstudio.net. My other hat is I research in astrophysics, and there everything has to be a lot more open. I have to be a lot more open-minded. I get sources of information from everything, just about, from Google to the UK Astro Data Service to the SWIFT website to the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, all over. And it's a lot harder work. You've got to do an awful lot more work to make sense of it, because you get a lot of highfalutin language, as it were, and you've got to try and make sense of it by comparing and contrasting, testing. Do you really agree with that? Because just because somebody's written it there, and even in high science, just because somebody has written it there does not necessarily mean it's true. It means it needs to be tested. And I think you've got to do that with all of that sort of thing. So it's a very different context. On the one hand, we're talking about supporting a product, a commercial product out in the marketplace. On the other hand, we're talking about researching stuff generally. And I think the two contexts are very different.
Well, sadly, we are out of time, and sadly, we're drawing to the close of another conference. But first of all, I'd like you all to thank the members of our panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, before you all go home, I do have a number of announcements and a number of... You don't want to be sitting there. You do have a number of announcements, a number of things that I'd like to say before I go, before we all go home. First of all... Okay. Something should be happening. 1 minute. I'm going to talk to you now for 1 minute. I think we've had a really good conference, and I think what I'd like to do is ask you to give a big round of applause to all the speakers who've spoken over the last 3 days, because I think everyone's made a tremendous effort and a tremendous contribution, and we've all benefited greatly from them all. Thank you to all the speakers. And while we're at it, we should also a round of applause to thank the Thistle Hotel for looking after us, and also to Sally and her AV team, who've done a tremendous job in supporting them. So I just want to remind you that, as I've said a number of occasions, we depend very heavily on the sponsorship from our commercial sponsors. So just one more round of applause to thank all of them for all the work that they've done and all the coming down to Brighton and supporting our conference. This slide tells us that this is an ISTC event. The ISTC exists outside TC UK. So if you're not already members of ISTC, please consider joining. You get a wonderful journal, The Communicator, 4 times a year. I'm not allowed to call it a magazine. You get local groups that meet, and there's lots of things that you can do to join in and to participate, not only in the local groups, but also helping with other things that the ISTC does, including helping to run the conference. And I know that my successor will be very grateful for other people who come and help. And if you like, I've been asked if you like to go to conferences. ISTC is part of the TC Europe organization, which links other technical communication societies. And Jean-Paul Bardet has asked me to mention that the next TC Europe colloquium will be on the 17th of April 2015, and the theme is Riding the Waves of Change. And I think some of us have been preparing our surfboards here to go and ride the waves of change. That's in Brussels in April, and more information on the TC Europe website. So the first thing I need to do now is one of our vendors, Clifford Sells, has asked us to do a prize draw. So if Elaine will come through with the prize. Okay. So let's have, I'm going to ask Kyron to just dip your hand in there and pick out a winner from deep at the bottom. And the winner is Bridget Rooney. Bridget Rooney is not here. She was here only yesterday, but we'll make sure that the prize gets to her in the future. Okay, so, column. So there are various people who work behind the scenes who do a great deal to help the conference get underway. So I think that what we really need to do now is to have a round of applause for Claire and for Elaine for all the work that they've been doing. Come out here, come out and take a bow. And pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I'd like just to finish on one very positive note. You know, I've been working as a technical communicator for 20 years, and sometimes you get the feeling that you're the guy who writes the thing that nobody reads. And it's very easy to get depressed and to devalue yourself. And I think that what we've done, what we've learned this week at this conference is that it's a crime to undervalue ourselves. We have a very valuable contribution to make. We make a real difference to real people in real situations. We can get people back on their bikes and stop them from falling off their bikes. And I think that's a really good message to take away. We do make a difference. So thank you all very much. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. Don't forget the Survey Monkey. Somebody said, please fill in the monkey survey, which is not quite right. Search for us on Storify and Eventify. Keep tweeting, keep following, and see you next year. Thank you very much.
David, don't go away. David, don't go away, please. There's one person we haven't thanked, which is this guy here. He's done a tremendous amount of work, excuse me, I shouldn't get so emotional. I mean, it's actually fear for what I've got coming to me, I think, in the next few years. Yeah. We actually wanted to try and find out something about David and some way we could actually show our gratitude to him. And he didn't want to tell us. So we kind of sort of went behind his back, and that didn't work. So then we kind of thought, well, we know he does a lot of other work outside of technical communication and TCUK. And one of the things that David has done for the last at least 2 years, I think, is give up his Christmas and volunteer at Crisis for Christmas. So we thought, as a way of, because he didn't seem to want anything and he doesn't want much attention, because he's that sort of guy, that we'd actually donate the money we would have spent on a prize, or at least a gift to Crisis for Christmas. So as a way of gratitude, David, please, on our behalf, the donation's been made in your name, and we hope you appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck to Colin, who is, from this moment, in charge of TCUK.